Time now for Coming In Hot with Brent Wallace, former Ottawa Senator Jason York, and Sean Simpson.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to Coming In Hot. Happy Thursday. Hey, guys, this time next month, we will be discussing the opening night game against the Florida Panthers and how that game went. We are edging closer.
Yeah. Nice to see some games, rookie camp heating up Yorkie, and just seeing some things here to finally realize, hey, training camp's not too far away, and we can start discussing all the line and D combinations.
Yeah, I always hated this time of year as a player because you're starting camp. It is exciting, but it's still. I hated camp. I was one of those guys, Simmer. You know why? Because I was a late round draft pick, and all the scouts are there with the cheerleaders and the pom poms, and they're cheering on the first rounders, and all the guys they get paid, and the lowly 7th round picks are sitting in there. Yeah, all right, can't wait for you guys to get out of here.
Yeah,
get down.
You'd always show up. You'd always show up, Wally, and you'd look right on the thing right away. For goaltender, a bit different, but hey, what line am I on? What number am I wearing? I somehow went from number 80 down to 34, which I thought I'd arrived, and then back up into the high 60s, and realized this is probably not trending in the right direction for young Sean Simpson.
Wally, Simmer, you just made me think of something. My first camp in Detroit.
TJ, wait, hold on a sec, Yorkie. TJ, just cue it up.
Let's go. We're going to it early. TJ, don't leave us hanging. Do you get it?
Please carry on.
I'll tell you guys a story about my first camp in Detroit. They had 87 players at said camp. My jersey number they gave me was 86. So back in the day when you went to camp in Detroit, it was held right at Joe Louis Arena. So to my point, why I don't like camp to this day is all the guys, the veterans and everything would come back, and they're all in the main room. So they get cozy in the main dressing room. And then you have the second dressing room. It's all the guys that are probably going to play in Adirondack, which was a farm team at the time, the high prospects, and they're all in there with their custom sticks and their names on their sticks. And then there's like a janitor's room down the hall where they throw the rest of the scrubs. And I find myself in this room with a couple of the guys that were invited to tryouts, and like back then there was 12 rounds, so it's like the 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th, 12th round picks, and we don't have sticks either. So they basically come and they throw a bunch of Steve Yzerman store sticks that are it's just a big piece of lumber right in the middle of the room. Here's some sticks for you guys. We're like, sticks. So needless to say, I was sent back to junior. I didn't even make it past. I think as soon as the inter squad game was done, I was packing my bags and heading back over to Windsor.
Yeah, quickly, my first camp, Wally, 1986, Mount Vernon, Virginia. We were in a trailer. Forget about a dressing room. We were in a trailer, and it was so hot, and we were going twice a day. So imagine what that gear was like by the time the afternoon came around. It was a hot, sweaty mess. Over to you, Wally, to officially open up the show.
Let's go. What do you got? Let's see what's on the report.
Wait, so Simmer, I'm just curious, what numbers did you have in the National Hockey League?
I only dressed for 3 games. 2 of them were emergency. One was 1988. Pete Peters got knocked out. Another one was crazy story that I've told a few times. I was doing color in the radio in Baltimore, and Dom Beaupre got hurt. I actually got a limousine down and backed up the rest of the game against the New York Rangers. And then my big drama, big start on the bench was against Patrick Waugh, who was on the bench as well in the Montreal Canadiens. So I think it was a range between the 34 was, I could see that my name, I knew if I played, my name tag would probably come off. It was a good Velcro job, but not more than that hanging on. So mixed around in the numbers, you knew what you could just look at the jersey and realize, that thing has not been sewn on permanently. That thing could come off at any second.
I've seen that picture. You get a lot of mileage out of that picture, the warm-up shot where you're skating around there.
Somebody just sent it to me, and I'm just like, thank God. And Patrick Waugh, and I think Scrudlin and Denny Savard in the background. I'm like, my God, you got to milk that. Like, you got to have something to show.
Right?
Oh, my God. Yeah.
I love it.
So So what was so you said you had a 60 number too. What number was that? When you, in
Oh, it was my first year of training camp, 1986. The camps, Wally, as Yorkie pointed out, were just crazy. Like there were invites from all over the place, and you'd want to play rookie games. I played a couple rookie games against Philadelphia, which was always exciting to go up there. Their practice rink in Voorhees, the one side didn't have any glass. It was just a brick wall. And you're like, that doesn't look like it would be a whole lot of fun to end up playing against. So I mixed around. Like I said, I got lower. But I also remembered 3 years in, guys, they drafted Ole Kolzig and Byron Defoe in the first and second round. And that's once again was a pretty good signal that I was going lower and lower on the depth chart.
Is that when you started doing color?
Oh yeah. No, I got latched onto that right away and realized, hey, the future for Sean Simpson is going to be on TV and radio, and then eventually scouting.
Yeah.
Nice.
All right. So the reason I ask is I when I pick my 649 numbers, I always use 33 just as a thank you for Yorkie. I'm not going to give him any money if I win, but now I'm going to add 34 into the mix.
All right, love it.
See if it brings me any luck.
Yeah, I think the only reason I chose that was trying to be a little bit different because everyone either was 130 or 33. But my old alumni from the Sioux who played in the National Hockey League at the time was John Van Beesbrook. So I thought that I think that was my rationale.
Back then too, like when you'd get called up, like when I'd get called up to play for Detroit, like people think you have a choice in numbers. No, you get whatever the trainer decides you're going to get. Here's number 38. I had one game here. You're wearing number 40. So I got a hockey card where I'm wearing number 40.
Wow. I'm trying to remember. Alfie's first number wasn't 11.
No,
his first camp number.
It was like.
Was it? No, it wasn't 5.
I don't know. But
Chris Phillips wore number 5 before he wore number 4.
That's right.
And even in the case of Alfie, it'd be real curious if you ask the scouts guys, what did they really think of him? You hear all the great stories all the time. And I think one of the more legendary ones came out of New Jersey, where the Quebec scout for New Jersey took so much crap for them drafting Marty Brodeur that he was not going to be a very good goaltender. Mike Dunham was going to be the guy. And gone on to be top 3, top 5. Best goaltenders ever, but that wasn't the way they felt initially. And I'm sure there's lots of guys that come in, and I'd say that with Peter Bondra, his rookie year, we didn't even have him in the lineup when they asked us as scouts to go around and do your opening lineup. And there he goes on and has a career and scores 501 goals.
Crazy.
Except people in Ottawa don't see it the same.
No, that did not go very well at all. Hey? Yeah.
No. Quickly, by the way, we have someone in the chat. Now I'll never remember his name, right? Fun for Algaron? Non? Anyway, he's $5 donation, Simmer, because he wants to know, was Brian Scrudlin as handsome and dashing as he remembers?
You know, I don't remember that. I remember just the nickname Screwy. And I remember him more, I think, from the Florida days of breaking everybody's hand on the penalty kill. So if you were to ask me who is more dashing of the 3 that's in my legendary picture, I would have gone with old spinorama, Mr. Denny Savard. That would probably be what I'd end up saying. So I don't recall that. Not that I don't judge guys, but I don't recall Brian Scrudlin being on that list.
I just saw Scrudlin about 6 months ago. He was at a charity hockey event. Still looks good. Still a handsome devil, Wally. Good looking, good guy.
He kind of had a bit of the Mark Messier chin going, I guess.
Yeah, right? yeah. Strong chin.
Yeah.
Alfie wore 63, as I'm reminded in the chat. Okay. But so that makes him the second best to ever do it. If Tyler Ennis was the best to ever do it. If Yorkie doesn't get it. Okay.
Right over
the focus of today's show, if we ever get to it, is we've talked a lot about the starts for the Ottawa Senators. And if we take a look back, the last 5 years of their first 20 games, it's not pretty. Now, one of them, by the way, if you see the dates, because I put them in, is the February 21st. That's because COVID, when the season started in January. But these are the 20 game marks for the last 5 years, and they haven't been above 28th overall in the league after 20 games. Makes it tough.
Very tough. Yeah, you're basically done by Thanksgiving, and the fans, the airs come out of the balloon, and everyone's like bitching and complaining.
Trade
and
them
then
all.
it's get rid of it. And then the post game shows and everything. It's just we know how it is. But yeah, I think I'll be interested to see what you guys think. I've got I was pretty quick, Wally, when you asked me. I sent mine in right away. I've got a good feeling.
Well, so we're each gonna give what our predictions are on the first 20 games. I've gone through the schedule. I've taken every team. I've looked at the last records for the last little bit. So I want to see if I'm closest to this. And then there's a little bit of guessing because you got to have overtime losses, and that's what makes it difficult. Well, maybe you don't.
Yeah.
We'll see how it goes. So let's take a look at, by the way, before we do this schedule, the Eastern Conference last year, the top 8 teams in the Eastern Conference, how they made the playoffs, I should say. Not everybody had a stellar record, right? The New York Islanders only had 8 wins. Tampa just had 9. So as we discussed this, and then you can see where they finished off the season, but it's not, they may not be out of it if they haven't got off to a good start is all. I'm just trying to bring a little bit of positivity here.
Yeah, well, I look at it quite simply, though. The unfortunate for it, guys, is that I think psychologically, and this is where it will change, when a team is like that, when I think the fragility of the group, you can talk about all the changes they've made as far as who they've brought in, as far as a coaching staff, as far as having a top goaltender, but there's still that feeling to me within the market itself, and the negativity that'll come if they get off to a slow start, anything below 500 after 20 games. And I think that's the difficulty, is just what is it going to be like psychologically, where if you're Tampa Bay, again, they're not the team that they were a few years ago, boys, but I don't think there's a panic there. It's kind of like, let's just relax. With the Washington Capitals, that was almost just all smoke and mirrors what they did last year. So from a Sens perspective, I just think for many, many reasons, including stimulating the market, that you want to see them get off to a good start. I do think it is psychologically really, really important, Yorkie.
Yeah, I do too. I do too. Just don't be so far out of it where you don't got a chance. I do believe a strong start's important, just as long as you're in the mix. To me, that's where they got to be. Just don't throw it away by getting off to an atrocious start. And to me, like I said the other day, the bar's not that high to get over how you started. We just saw what some of those starts were. So I'm bullish, and I always do the when you talk about playoffs, my friends always ask me, so where do you think the Sens are going to finish? I always do process elimination. I'm like, well, who do you think's making it? Who do you think's coming out? And it's interesting when you do that because you run out of teams in a hurry. When you start talking about teams, because one would have to think Carolina, they're a great team. They're built to win right now. Toronto's always a regular season darling. The Rangers are always good. The Devils should be better. Florida, Tampa, and all of a sudden, hey, holy shit, I got 6 teams already. There's 2 more spots available. So it's a pretty, for people listening or watching, go through the Eastern Conference and do that. Say, if you think Ottawa's a playoff team, who's coming out?
Yeah, and I usually just look at the division itself, and I still feel like Florida, although a short summer, obviously a very good hockey club, along with Toronto, where I don't, and I have to be careful, because last year I was so bullish on Tarasenko not being where he was at, looking at the preseason, then he comes in the regular season, he looks good. I kind of feel the same thing about teams. I'm curious where Boston's going to be. I'm assuming they wrap up the Swayman situation, which is obviously huge and pivotal, but also Tampa Bay, when you lose a guy like Stamkos, and just kind of where they're trending, where does Ottawa mix in with that? And I'm, again, we'll see what our predictions were for the first 20 games. I'm actually, once again, very bullish on the Ottawa Senators, but I'm also in a wait and see mode as to the real changes that were within the division itself, where we can complain all we want about Toronto and them being too soft for the playoffs and everything else, but still a hell of a hockey team. But yeah, where does Ottawa slide in? Do they have a chance to catch a Boston or catch a Tampa Bay?
Yeah. Tampa's the one that's interesting to me, fellas, because you think sooner or later they're going to take a step backwards, because everybody does eventually. Like
same with Washington,
Chicago, like all those good Chicago teams, Pittsburgh, everybody eventually takes a step backwards. And that could be with no Stammer there, and all of a sudden, Vasilevsky gets hurt. Like, health is such a key thing that people forget about, and that's sometimes uncontrollable. So it's going to be another team I'm bullish on is the Devils. I like what
the New Jersey Devils. Yep,
they're going to be in the mix too. So, like I said, it's never been tougher to make the playoffs.
Well, by the way, you can make a selection if you like at Bet365, as this show proudly presented by Bet365. Open an account with Bet365 today and bet on a huge range of markets, including who you think will make the Stanley Cup playoffs. So whatever the sport, whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. Use code DAILY365. Must be 19 years of age or older. Please play responsibly.
You know who's not an ordinary company is BEI Wally, our good friends at Bonisher Excavating. Great for sprucing up that curb appeal with your house. If you want to get some driveway paving done, they're great at that. Aggregate and topsoil sales as well. They can help you out. BEI also does equipment rentals. You can reach them at 613-432-1120 or on the web at bonisherexcavating.com. BEI is helping to shape the Ottawa Valley, and please slow down in construction zone. The kids are back at school.
They are. Just came up in the chat. This wasn't in the nerd report, but
yeah.
Would you guys like to see an expanded playoff format?
Like a play-in, like a wild card game?
Like, do you expand it to 10 teams? Do you do, because that throws off all the numbers, but do you, like 12 is way too high.
I wouldn't mind seeing, and this is kind of like you're catching me off guard here. Like maybe you reward the regular season where somebody gets a bye or something, and there's
but
like
they don't want to sit, do they?
Yeah.
You want to sit in 2 weeks?
Yeah.
I'm just talking about.
Yeah.
I'm talking about I like what they do. I don't mind a one game only wild card game that gets you in, maybe for that. I don't know how you do it, but that's exciting.
Yeah.
You just played 82 games.
Yeah, I've looked at it. Yeah. Yeah, the only thing I say, Wally, and I've dealt with this in the American Hockey League. We're always trying to come up with different concepts, how you'd end up selling and what you'd end up doing. I think the NBA has been very, progressive in what they've done. When I look at this now, and it used to be a joke in the National Hockey League, where 16 of the 21 teams made the playoffs. You're now talking about half the teams not making it. You're talking about the Ottawa Senators 7 years in a row. I think something personally has to give. Here's my thing, and I've always been very bullish on interdivisional play. I'm not a big fan of, and this is what I would do. Complete format would be 4 plays 5 and a 1-game play-in, because you've got to basically end the season on a Saturday. Have the 4 versus 5. You'd have 4 of those games, either Monday, Tuesday, however you want to work it. Then you open up the regular playoffs on the Wednesday. And what I'd end up doing is I would go through, I want those first 2 rounds to be the interdivisional. That's what builds up rivalries with the Montreal Canadiens, hopefully the Toronto Maple Leafs once again. And then for the final 4, I would reseed based on regular season record to trying to change things up a little bit, where you could see a LA play in Ottawa or play at Toronto, whoever it is. So that's always been my feeling, is that, what's that?
You want them to switch conferences now?
For the final 4, Wally. Yeah, absolutely.
Simmer.
Yeah.
That's
the progressive mind. That's the information superhighway working right there. So you just get on that bad boy and go for a ride. But that's what I would end up doing. You asked me what I wanted to do with the playoffs, and I laid that bad boy right out for you.
Stop bullying him, Wally.
Listen. You just leave it to 8 teams, but you go 1 to 8. None of this nonsensical. We need to have Toronto and Ottawa.
I hate the 1 to 8. For the Ottawa Senators, there's never been better playoff rounds. Now, they didn't like the outcome with the Toronto Maple Leafs, but that playoff series, the original one against the Montreal Canadiens, there is nothing, even the year they went to the semifinals, that to me ended up touching that. And that's what I go. And I guess just traditionally growing up a Montreal Canadiens fan, I just think of the old division there, and just what that felt like to play Quebec Nordiques or to play the Boston Bruins, and how meaningful that was. And I like that for the first couple of rounds.
Yeah.
You might not matchups.
Yeah,
I would still like, and I know this is tough with travel and everything. I would love to see 1 play 16. First plays last. I know, and put more, and then that last place team, make it so you have to come. They got to travel across the country, and then home ice gets really important there, right? Because you're traveling a lot more. But yeah, the best team plays the worst team. I don't mind that.
Yeah,
leave it at 16. You played 82 games. If you can't figure it out by the first 82 games, you shouldn't.
Yeah. The one thing I will say about the NHL, the one thing we have to quit doing is changing everything all the time.
Yeah,
it's like the game's pretty goddamn good. Like, it's pretty good. And playoff hockey, there's nothing like it. I think we get caught up in changing everything. And I think they have finally found the right recipe for the playoffs on how many penalties to call and not call. because I thought this was one of the best playoffs in a long time.
Fantastic.
Where they let the players decide it, and you didn't call the ticky-tacky stuff that just ruins hockey games. There's nothing worse than watching a playoff game and seeing it decided with a 5-on-3 power play.
Yeah,
Nothing.
Yeah, I mean the National Football League, the CFL, and I thought this year's playoffs, we usually talk about the first round being the best. It just got better and better. And I'll also say with 32 teams, and who knows where expansion will go in the next few years, guys, the league flat out just has never been better. Like when you go through what a bottom feeder looked like, say way back in the day when Ottawa came into the league compared to now, well, Ottawa is one of the teams that didn't make the playoffs, and you still go through the lineup and you're like, wow, you got a Brady Tkachuk, you got a Stützle, you got a Sanderson, you have Shabbat, now you have Ullmark, you have the talent, and then pretty much the American European influence. It's just, never has a game been better. And you just mentioned New York, no reason to fix something that's working.
Yeah, because I find as Canadians and general hockey fans, we're always trying to do stuff and change stuff. It's good. Leave it alone.
Okay.
Quit asking questions, Wally. Quit asking questions about changing stuff.
All I want them to do, and someone brought it up, I apologize, in the chat, is the 3 points. 3 points for a win, right?
Okay.
Like let's not have this one overtime point loss. Or it just can we not just simplify this?
Yeah, very, very strange though. If you've ever done the math or gone through the process, which I did, I think 4 years ago, the standings really don't change. But it's certainly an interesting debate down the stretch. Your ability to gain 3 points or to lose, for that matter, could end up affecting things. But if you turn that up and go to kind of the soccer mode, would be interesting to see.
Or the international hockey mode is right. Like you go to the World Championships, it's 3 points for a win. So anyway, I'm just tired of loser points. All right, let's move on to actually the topic of today. After 20, TJ, let's put up the October schedule. If there's ever a year, I believe, for the Sens to get off to a great start, this schedule appears to be it. Now, it's tough to open up, obviously, against the defending Stanley Cup champions. Fair enough. But then they host, right, where they go to Montreal, which they have played very well in Montreal. So then they host the Kings, the Devils, and the Lightning. That could be a tough week, but they're at home. They play better. And besides, the Kings aren't everything they used to be. Neither are the Tampa Bay Lightning. So then they face Utah and Vegas on the road. This road trip to me is important. And here's why. One, it's the rookie. You'll have the rookie dinner in there. You will have time to, right? They're going to get out of Utah and they will go spend an extra day in Vegas. So they will get to have a little bit of fun play in Vegas, bond together, and then they do have to go and face Colorado afterwards. But that'll bring that team together, and then it's home to St. Louis. That could be iffy. In November, it's a little tighter, but this is their only back-to-back game in the month of November, right off the top, at MSG, home to Seattle. Home to Seattle. And then they go Buffalo, right? The Islanders,
that's a tough
Boston.
It's a
tough month, but it's doable. Their records against these teams aren't as bad as people think. So the first 20 games ends at Vancouver. They play Vancouver. So, Yorkie, I'm going to start with you.
Yes.
What do you think the Ottawa Senators are going to be able to do in the first 20 games?
And I think it's going to be tougher now than I originally forecasted, because my record I sent to you was, what was it? Something like 11-8 and what was it?
You were very bullish.
Yeah, I think I was 3 games over 500. I do think they're going to get off to a good start. I think it's going to be a little more difficult than people are anticipating. Those are some tough teams they're playing, especially those road trips when you go out west like that. It's really tough on the body. But I do think this training camp they're going to have, I think this is going to be the first time in a long time where they're going to have a culture. And culture is really important. Culture to me is more important than that buzzword everybody loves to say, structure. Structure. Play with structure. I think culture is going to be developed here at training camp, and it's going to be developed from having a really hard camp where guys come together, work hard. You've already heard Tim Stützle talking about it. You heard everybody. They're anticipating this, and they're excited for it because they want to be better. They want to get off to a better start. So I think this camp is going to set the stage for a good start where they finish off a couple games, 2 or 3 games over 500, and stay in the mix and don't be out of it by Thanksgiving. So that's where I think the Ottawa Senators are going to do. They're going to be right in the mix, not leading the division or anything, but right in a spot where they're going to keep themselves alive and keep some excitement going throughout this season. That's what I think.
So, okay, then are you changing your
Nope.
record?
No, I'm not changing it because now that I think about it, if you look around the NHL right now, nobody has a perfect team on paper. Carolina's pretty damn close, but I always question their goaltending. But everybody's got holes.
Sure.
Like you look at Boston, everyone's like, "Oh, Boston's going to be terrible this year. They've lost Bergeron, they've lost whoever, Foligno, all the guys they lost. We're like, how are these guys going to do it? Well, they're going to do it by playing tighter, better coached, and culture, where expectations are raised. You hold each other accountable, and it comes from within. And that's why Staios went out and did all those moves, because he brought guys in like David Perreault, like Cousins, like Jensen, guys that are going to help you build a culture. This before they had a lot of young guys running the ship that didn't know how to run a ship. And you had Claude Giroux there trying to do his best, but now he's insulated with more older guys, more veterans, and most importantly, Simmer, they got a goalie. And this goalie is going to make a difference.
Yeah, and internally, and you mentioned that with the culture, I could understand last year why everyone was pissed off and in a bad mood. You can pretend all you want, and we had the buzzword a couple of years ago about playing meaningful games, but there's nothing worse than being in American Thanksgiving and realizing, okay, now the St. Louis Blues back a while ago had the big rally in Philadelphia and had the fun song, and they ended up coming back. But it is a rarity. I mean, you go back to the Hamburglar run. So to me, this is real key. I ended up going with 10-10, but more of my focus, guys, is on how many points I'll have at the 20 game mark. And I'm thinking 20 or a little north of that. That's why I ended up going that and leaving out any of the overtime losses or anything else. And I expect them to have a good start. I expect there to be pressure, and I'm hoping they're able to embrace it, guys, because to me, this is a big love-in right now, and Ann Lauer loves all the players, and the players are happy to be here. Well, there are internal expectations, and these expectations right now are very important. And the business side badly needs the market to be able to respond and have some faith in this hockey club. And a big part of that's going to be getting off to a good start. That's the part when you look at, hey, Cyril Leader touched on the season ticket base not being quite where it's at. You need a start here. You need momentum. You need people that are looking and saying, well, you know what? It's coming Christmas time here. We're going to plan a trip or we're going to buy something else. Nope. You know what we decided here? The Ottawa Senators are a hot ticket. Now we're going to end up going out and enjoying them. So that, to me, there's a lot of pressure. And I think that this veteran group now, they're not a young squad. I think they should really just embrace that going into the year.
Okay. So I went with, because I did my homework and researched this to the nth degree. I had 10-7-3, I think is the number I went with, because I think Linus Ullmark, as you pointed out, is going to make the difference for them. They've got Edmonton, and they've got obviously Colorado, and they face Vegas twice, and there's a lot of good teams they got to go up against. But I think they're just going to surprise people. If you're not ready to play Ottawa every night, I think they're going to punch you in the mouth, and they're going to steal a couple extra wins.
The good thing about playing those types of teams like the Colorados and the Vegases and the teams that are expected to do well, it's good to hit them up early, because a lot of time those teams will rally a little bit later. So I'm a big fan of playing those teams early in the season. Usually takes veteran guys and teams that have won sometimes a little time to get going. So I think that's a good thing. It's a good thing to have a little bit tougher schedule when you're playing some of those teams, because as a player, when you're rolling to Vegas to play a team that's won the cup with a veteran team, you make sure you're up for that game, and mentally, like you prepare the same for every game. But there's something when you play a team like a Colorado, like a Vegas, like a Tampa, you just know you have to be sharp, because if you screw up, you're going to get embarrassed.
Yeah, and I think it's also a perfect time to catch Florida. And then the other key here, guys, is when you look at Ullmark's background, he has never had that true number one workload. How do they end up handling the goaltending at the same time? Because I do feel like it'll be a nice two-headed monster. And I think Forsberg in that role, of a support guy in the 2 spot in the back-to-back games, other games when you get into that heavy slate in November, I think that's going to be a big factor. And I think we're going to see some of the play that we saw from him that earned him the contract extension. So I think that's a big factor as well, is that how much do you want to play Ullmark? How much is he comfortable with? And at the same time, what can Forsberg give you as far as a very capable number 2?
Defined role too, right? With your goaltender, this is our starter, this is our guy. And when you know what your role is, and you pretty well, you look at your schedule when you're going to play. Forsberg's had some signs in the past, guys, where he's had some really good stretches. So I think
very much so.
I think now he's in a role that's going to bring out the best in him. And you've heard both these guys; they have a good relationship. Good working relationship's really important with your goaltender, as well as with your D. Those guys always sit together in the dressing room, go out for dinner together. So yeah, I like it. The defined roles are important, and both guys are coming in knowing, and they're still going to compete. They're still going to challenge each other because nothing's giving. But yeah, I like this. I like this tandem to start the season, guys.
So this is the guy that you wanted your number 1 starter. No, I'm just kidding. I had snapped this picture of Ullmark at the golf tournament. All the guy is always just happy. He's laughing. I just love it. So
it's great. He's got some swagger. I like that. He's got some he's a goalie. He's guy likes to have fun too, which I like about him.
Yeah, and just the whole way the situation's been handled is guys by the Ottawa Senators. I mean, all of a sudden you feel like this is home. And again, big love in. Now you got to end up playing some good hockey, but coming over here quickly, getting used to the city, making the decision not only to come into here, but hey, I read a lot into the fact of guy buying a home. You're not doing that generally when you have 1 year left on your contract. So the transition for him, the comfort level, having played with Forsberg previously, the feel around the city, around the players, and at the same time, I think he wants to shove it up the of the Boston Bruins and show them, listen, here's what you left, and I'm sure Swayman will get signed, but hey, you made a major mistake here in letting me go. So I think he's just in a perfect spot right now to start the season.
Yeah, 100%.
We are a week away from training camps opening, and the Boston Bruins do not have their number 1 goalie signed to a deal. Is this a massive misstep by them?
They'll get it done. It's just it's tactics, negotiation right now. But he's one of the top 3 goalies in the world right now. There's no way they're not going into the season without this guy signed. I think it's just some posturings going on right now, Simmer. I think it gets done.
Yeah, I'm not saying it's not going to, Yorkie, but historically, to your point, they really have almost always gotten guys done. I remember my buddy Jason Allison holding out, but they also, though, have a salary structure. And in the past, going back to Ray Bourque, to Chara, to Bergeron, you'd hear about them pressuring some guys to take a contract. Yeah. In the case of Swayman, I don't necessarily sense that. And I think he is an unbelievable goaltender. What people get caught up sometimes, and when you look at a guy like UC Saros, you have to remember that they're paying for unrestricted years. With the case of Swayman, a lot of that contract talk has been for restricted years. So how do you end up looking at it? I'm pretty confident they get it done, but I do wonder from a culture standpoint, as far as the trade and everything else, I don't think he can operate in that mentality. When you had the Ullmark trade, you had it lined up. The curiosity is, did they take Korpisalo at all for any reason, thinking that, hey, if we run into a bit of a bind here with Swayman, can we run with this guy? That is a little bit of curiosity for me. But to your point, Yorkie, I think they get it done. It's just a question is he willing to fall into line? And when you see the numbers and the terms, which I saw was, I think, 4 years at just over 6, that certainly seems on the low side.
A lot of that was internally to the players, when they would players would go to other players and say, hey, listen, do you guys want to win here? A guy like Marchand, for instance, he goes, I took less because we'd have more room with salaries. So because winning is like number 1 for me, and Bergeron the same. And they had that was enforced by the players in Boston.
Yeah.
And they said, hey, you want to, they've said, Simmer, like if you want to go and get all the money, we're going to make every day in practice for you miserable.
Yeah. Well, and in the case of Ray Bourque, quite simply, listen, Ray is the bar, and Bergeron was the same thing coming in. That's where I had to laugh. And different time, different place was Brendan Shanahan talking about the guys in Toronto possibly taking a little bit less to build a winner. How did that work out at the end of the day? Yeah, no, thank you. So it's really hard to enforce.
When was that said?
Oh no, he talked about it in Toronto, and I thought, and the back in Detroit days, they had unlimited resources based on no salary cap and anybody that was coming in. Exactly, Yorkie. So I had to chuckle, and that to me, I like the winning culture idea. I like guys buying in, but I would never, ever, as a player, lean on another guy to tell him to take less to stay there. I just would. I don't think that's any of your business. That's up to the agent, to the team, and the player. And I would never begrudge a guy for taking more, or trying to grind it out, or even forcing a trade for that matter. I just don't believe in that personally.
Alfie's mullet just mentioned Swayman's agent can show them 20 clips of Corpusalo letting in the first goal of the game.
22. It's 22.
Is he? Is Swayman with Louis Gross as well?
I believe so. Yeah.
And the only thing I say with Lewis is that, there has been a tendency. Of course, he was the one that made some comments, or comments were thrown out about Pinto. He's had some holdouts in the past. We just don't see it very often anymore because, for the most part, guys, when it comes to doing contracts,
I think.
It's a pretty easy process. Hey, what are your comparables? Are you looking bridge? Are you looking long term? Usually you can lay this out pretty good. Then the question is, when you hear people talking about him asking for maybe $10 million a year, that seems awfully extreme. But again, all this is just rumors. And I feel at the end of the day, and he's got his good alumni behind the bench, University of Maine, Jim Montgomery. So Monty said, hey, I believe he's going to get signed by training camp.
Yeah, love Monty. It's a pretty good game of high stakes poker, though. If they decide to do the holdout thing and Boston sticks to their guns, it's one thing when you're a player holding out, because other guys can pick it up. But when it's your number one goaltender, and all of a sudden, if the team gets off to a bad start, the pressure to sign him, I just don't know if you'd want to go through that. Like, let's get this done. If I'm Boston, before we have to start getting to the poker table here and hoping we play well.
Yeah. So
there's more pressure on him to sign.
Yeah, and Mr. Jacobs, the owner, there's always a lot of pressure on that group. And I think people would be surprised, Yorkie. I lived in that area. You, of course, played there. What the profile of the Boston Bruins is, the Celtics are way down, Bruins a little higher. But this time of year, all you're talking about is who's going to be the left tackle for the New England Patriots and how much do the Red Sox suck. Like, you are not even on the radar. And in that market like that, they are trending in the wrong direction as far as kind of the star power, the cachet they end up having. And I totally agree with you. Like, Jeremy Jacobs doesn't fool around. Hey, we not only have to play well, but we got to make the playoffs. Otherwise, some heads are going to roll. And I think everybody internally understands that.
What did you think of your boy Brady Simmer on his broadcasting debut? You catch that?
Yeah, not bad. Not great.
It's
but,
tough. It's tough. It's always tough.
Everybody's going to hate, but I listen. I'm pretty. I'll be honest when it comes to football, because I know so little about it. I'm so impressed by all of them. No, you know what I mean? Because I find when I go to a game, half the time, especially in the CFL, I'm like, what is going on here? Like, what just happened? So I just sit back and realize, hey, these guys are pros. And at the end of the day, from Tom Brady's perspective, you've got such a huge part of the fan base that just absolutely hates him, no matter what he ends up saying or what he ends up doing.
He was getting crushed on social media the whole.
Oh my God, yeah. No, but I it'll be curious, because a guy like that, I thought he did great at his roast personally, the way he handled it and the way he kind of set him up. But it will be interesting, because hey, you know what it's like, you doing the broadcasting. You all of a sudden get that deer in the headlights feel, and you start to get a little bit nervous. You start reading some of the social media, and all of a sudden your confidence level ends up going down a little bit.
Like, so it's tough, and Yorkie, you know this, and well, you both do. You were color as well. Yeah. It's tough to step in and explain what you're seeing in articulate thoughts. It's not just, I played the game, I can do it. Like, there's a real skill to it, and I think of, like, Ray Ferraro was amazing at it. And there's a few others, but it is not just a simple, he was a star, so it's easy to do. It's like Wayne Gretzky wasn't a very good coach because he couldn't step in and explain what he needed to do as a coach. He also was in Arizona. That doesn't matter.
The thing that people, like, behind the cameras, when people don't realize, when you're doing, especially hockey color, and you're up in the box, you have to come up with something insightful to say. And the one thing, when there's an icing, if you get 6 icings in a row and you're scheduled to go to commercial break, because you're not allowed to go to commercial break after an icing, you're all of a sudden come up with the most boring analogies. Well, it was a good shift by that guy. And all of a sudden, this guy's not saying any, well, it's 6 icings in a row, for God's sake. It's a lot of pressure here. But
I also got to say, when I did TV and radio, I did it for the Washington Capitals, and I was a fan. And I knew so much about the team at the time. I was scouting, I was doing broadcasting. The appreciation I have, and I always think to my buddy Kenny Albert, who, if you've read his book lately, you might see that I was a little mentioned in there. But when you're doing, first of all these different sports guys, but the other part is when you're doing 2 different teams every week, man, oh man, that to me on the football side of right away, you got to know who the player's name is. You got to know what's happening, who's coming in and out. It's not just about one team where you're a big homer in the stands. You've got to really understand that. So, not an easy job to do for sure. But hey, at 35 million per for 10 years, that's a pretty good start.
Yeah. Last football thing, because I know we're hockey show here. How about everybody going down with the Cincinnati Bengals losing in the suicide pools? Oh boy, catastrophe.
No, that's you're right, and that's what it feels like in the National Football League. I know they've increased it to what, are they at 17 games now? But it still feels like that first game. Like, if you're a Baltimore Ravens fan, you're super bullish on your product, but hey, you've gone in and lost to the Chiefs, and suddenly it feels like the sky is falling.
Well, it's everybody, right? It's almost like game 1 of the playoffs. Everybody, as soon as your team loses game 1, you're like, oh my God, it's over.
We're done.
Exactly.
Anyway, just quickly, everybody, or the chat poll, very bullish. The 53% of the people polled said 11 plus wins for the Sens after 20 games. Here is a reminder of what we chose. Yorkie, the most positive of the group here today, 11, 7, and 2 at 24 points on this season.
I like Simmer, nice and straightforward. 10, 10, and 0. I like it.
Well, you know what? And I know I didn't even really think about the overtime losses, guys. I went more for the point totals. I just thought in my head, hey, if they could have 20 points in the bank after 20 games, would you be in a good spot? Do you have a confidence level? You touch on the culture part of it. Is everybody around you feeling like, hey, we have the ability now to actually switch gears and take it up another notch and really not be in this, I want to play some meaningful games, like really be in the playoff hunt and get people excited about that for the first time in 8 years.
Yeah. Well, if we go back to the 8 teams that made the playoffs last year, all of them had 22 points or more. So based on you, Simmer, they're not going to get in.
Okay.
I still can't believe the Washington Capitals made the playoffs last year with that goal differential. Like, that just did not make any sense whatsoever.
Yeah. Oh, they showed their talk about a team at the same time rolling the dice on the offseason too, right? I mean, the moves that they've made, again, and it's interesting because the focus is quite simply to get Ovi to break Gretzky's record. That's what they're living on.
All that matters. That's all that matters.
Yeah, it really is, and that's kind of camouflages where the club is at. They're no different than the Pittsburgh Penguins. I mean, they are both totally trending in the wrong direction as far as where their stars are at and where their club is at and the lack of depth.
Did Sidney Crosby finish his career as a Penguin?
That's a great question.
I believe in this case, guys, he does. I just think from start to finish that he wants to be a Pittsburgh Penguin. And from an ownership standpoint, I am not and I've used this term a few times in the show, and I apologize, bullish. I still think there's some fragility in that Pittsburgh Penguins market. Like, I don't think hockey is necessarily a layup. Again, another one of the American cities you go to, all they talk about is the Steelers. I think Sidney Crosby needs to stay as a Pittsburgh Penguin and see where they're able to maneuver, because the future is not very bright there. So absolutely, in my case, Yorkie, I think he goes start to finish. I think that he just wants to be a Pittsburgh Penguin forever.
I just don't know how because there's your piece, right? If you decide to do it in the next couple of years to really change the direction of that hockey club, because Malkin's not really worth anything anymore.
Great point.
If you did decide to do that, man, you could set your team up for a long time and restock, and because that's just, there'd be a line, because he's still in great shape. He's still at the top of his game.
Yeah.
But I'm of the believer, guys. I never say never. Ray Bourque, was traded. Wayne Gretzky was traded.
Well, Ray Bourque wanted to be traded, though.
Yeah, but he was still traded.
But I think of the Steven Stamkos, right? Of
Stamkos.
I mean, he's a Tampa Bay like if you ever say Steven Stamkos, you're not going to go, oh yeah, the Nashville Predator. So
but too many teams, they get too emotionally attached to their players because they forget it is a business, and they wait too long, they hold on too long. Tampa continually makes good business decisions, and you do this because your players are important, but at the end of the day, it's the team that has to be most important, and the team and the fan base, and you got to make tough decisions. And Pittsburgh held on to Malkin too long. They could have traded him a couple years ago and got a lot for him, and they waited too long. And you got to make those tough decisions. Too many teams don't do it.
Yeah, I can't disagree. And in the case of Stamkos, when people point to his point totals, he has become a little bit of a one-dimensional player, more of a power play guy. Now you switch him out, and we'll see what Gensel ends up doing. One of the best examples, guys, and this is where I've always discussed okay, people are like, well, we don't want to go into a full rebuild. And my point is, well, you're going to arrive at the same point eventually by just grinding your stars. And no better example of this is the Calgary Flames when they had Kiprusoff and Iginla in their prime of their career. Those are chips. Now, again, contracts can be a little tough with no movements, but those are pieces that they just ran, the treads right off of the tires, and you'll arrive at the same point. You want to play this, going to be okay. Eventually, you're going to be at a bottom feeder one way or another. So either go through that, and I think the sports business now has never been more ready and fans more engaged in understanding, hey, doesn't work for everybody, but if we've got to do what Ottawa did, do what Toronto did, took Washington, I was there, took them 14 years to win, but to me, that's still the only way to build a Stanley Cup winner outside of the good old Vegas Knights, which I can't explain.
Might just be a good organization.
Oh, they are, Wally. Yeah, but I mean, just as far as my theory of, they don't have any. You go through their lineup. I don't know if they have anybody that they've actually drafted. It's been absolutely incredible to see the formula, see what they came up with, and it was a capability of winning a Stanley Cup.
I just think they're really good at identifying talent and what they need to get it. Like Chandler Stevenson wasn't a real name that anybody knew, and suddenly he's a star in the playoffs. Right? They've had a few of those guys. That Shea Theodore wasn't really a big star. A lot of people, because they play out west, and so everybody in the East doesn't pay attention as much. But they had a bunch of guys who just got the job done, and that's all you ended up needing.
Well, and you also very rarely, as much as we just touched on Stamkos, we had a decision. How often do the Mark Stones of the world in the prime of their career go to market? They almost never do. And at the end of the day, they paid nothing to get him. And then the other big one that I think is still a big regret, guys, is Pietrangelo. And you talk about a player that would have finished his career with St. Louis, probably had his number retired. Those situations don't come up very often, but they put them in the cells. And let's also face facts here, just like Tampa Bay and other teams. They've done as good a work as possible to manipulate the salary cap and to keep good players. But there's no doubt that they've identified, and they're a team concept, But as I said, rare situations, and they turn themselves right from day one, guys, into a destination.
Well, go ahead, Yorkie. Sorry.
Well, also too, you got to give credit to the way that team is coached. Like Cassidy holds those guys accountable. Yeah. I've talked to guys that played on that team, and it doesn't matter who you are on that team, you're held accountable, and the players hold each other accountable. It's like I talked about, they have a culture there, and it's a culture of winning, but it's created with your players within that locker room where everybody knows the standard and what's expected. And it's when Jack Eichel was traded there, players were consulted before that move was made, and he came in and he knew, I have to be part of this, because if I don't, I'm going to have 20 guys making my life miserable. And that's how it works. That's how good teams do it. Good teams have a culture where they control the room, and, coaching is very important, but it's the end of the day. At the end of the day, it comes back to the players in that locker room and how they go about their daily business.
Yeah, and Eichel, Wally, again, was a very unique situation because we have seen a Pierre-Luc Dubois bounce around, Laine, Puljujärvi not even being in the league. But Eichel was actually, as a player, trending in the right direction. Where he wasn't trending in the right direction was as a person. But the fact they were able to pull that off, get him at a reasonable ask as far as a trade, and flat out, that's a guy that you can build on for years. That they're just rare situations, and that's a credit to George McPhee and Kelly McCrimmon and ownership.
And Simmer, they're like, let's be honest, like Vegas is pro scouting. Like some of the guys they identified, especially in the early years, like they said, you know what, let's this William Karlsson guy here. Let's this guy we think is better than what he's shown, and that's what happens. You bring guys in and you give them an opportunity, and wow, look at it, this guy's now a 40-goal scorer. Like it's that guy. William Karlsson is one of the best two-way players in the NHL. One of the best. And he's a guy they identified earlier, Jonathan Marchessault, when they brought him in. That's just the good teams have good scouts that identify players and they help accelerate your program that much quicker.
Yeah, and I think it's total fallacy for people to think this is based on the rules. The trades that they pulled off with teams, how foolish even the Anaheim looked on the Theodore situation. Yeah, they milked teams, and they just did a real good job, as you said, Yorkie, of identifying guys that could not just come and play in the National Hockey League, but be very effective players.
Yep. One last thing on, even though there's Adam's not happy that we're discussing other teams, is the salary cap. They have discussed doing something to it based on how to fix basically the Vegas problem, right? Of adding a $5 million player at the deadline, but only having to pay him $1 million. And so that once the cap is done at the playoffs, they can put him in the lineup type thing. Like, do we need to adjust the salary cap somehow to level which seems like leveling the playing field?
What do you think, Simmer?
Well, again, this is something I've thought about quite a bit, guys. I have no issue with the salary cap itself for the regular season, but it was Tampa Bay, and I think Montreal had unloaded a couple of players the year they ended up playing Tampa and ended up going to the finals. I think the disparity of the on-ice product was $100 million to $60 million. Well, quite simply, guys, when it comes to the playoffs, you should have the same salary cap. There should not be a difference in the salary cap. Now, I'll go even deeper on this, and people make it out to be and we've had these discussions kind of off the air, Yorkie, talking about the taxation situation. I wouldn't mind, and I know it wouldn't be perfect. I wouldn't mind at some point if they have a net versus gross salary cap for the National Hockey League, but that's probably a little bit too confusing. But without a doubt, at the end of the regular season, the salary cap should be in play, Yorkie, come playoff time.
Yeah, it makes sense, doesn't it? Like, what changes? All of a sudden, you've changed things, and guys have now come off IRR, and you've now got a monstrous salary cap for the playoffs. So it's a little bit of an unfair advantage. I think there's something to that, absolutely.
Like in the case of Stone, you're adding an $8.5 million player, and you go back to when Tampa ended up doing that with Kucherov. And I don't feel like, for the most part, although Bruce Cassidy did not tell us the truth, and all of a sudden Stone was back in the lineup, I don't think it's very often you go to a guy and say, listen, you're going to sit out the last 20 games of the season and you're going to be ready to go. Okay, you're getting close to being healthy, and maybe you wait 2 or 3 games to fit in the cap in the playoffs. That's pretty hard to monitor. But at the end of the day, absolutely should be a hard cap come playoff time, just like there is in the regular season.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll see. I don't think they change it, but I just somehow they got to figure it out.
Well,
anyway.
Well, they'd have to, quite simply, when you look at the money on the books, guys, and if you're the players, first of all, you have to ask, okay, is it 50-50 as far as a revenue? What's being spent? What is actually there, for the players? And at the end of the day, as long as they're still getting their cut and that money's being paid, obviously paying out as a 50%, it won't be a big deal. So that would something I'm guessing would have to be collectively bargained. And for the players' perspective, I don't think it would end up being a big deal. Now, that would certainly make it interesting for the trade deadline. That would probably alter the amount of moves we'd end up seeing.
Yeah, it certainly would. Absolutely. There you go. That would be change things drastically, the trade deadline. Then there would be nothing to talk about.
Exactly.
By the way, trade deadline March 7th this year. It's a Friday. Ottawa's home on Saturday that day, so they'll be at home to make these moves. It'll be interesting to see what they need to do at that point as they make the playoff push.
Yeah,
right?
And let's also think of February and how many Ottawa Senators will be playing in the Four Nations tournament. How does that alter it? Does Ullmark end up being the starting goaltender? Does Sanderson make it? I assume Brady Tkachuk would, but just how that's going to affect some of the rosters. And I'm assuming now, am I correct in saying that did Dominic Hasek get hurt at the Olympics when he was with Ottawa, guys?
Yes.
We saw who was it from the? I'm blanking on a name here. Anyways, Islander player that's playing in Toronto, and John Tavares end up tearing up his knee, right? So that's to me, this is a meaningless tournament, but it'll be interesting in which teams just get some time off, keep their roster together, and how many are from Sweden, Finland, the United States, and Canada.
So we'll see how that plays out. There was a couple of things I was going to get to, but we'll have to skip them for another day, probably. Yorkie, I need to know, as someone brought it up on Twitter, I was going to let it go. What happened to your 7-iron? Do you have a 7-iron in your golf bag?
Oh, I had to order a new 7-iron. I was playing, I don't know if you guys remember Saturday last weekend. It was awful. Terrible weather. So I do this annual golf tournament at Canada. Good friend of mine, the mayor, Tony D, sets it up. It's a great tournament. It's 27 holes, but they had to modify it to 18 this year. But anyhow, it was so wet that day, and my hands were super slippery. And I'm on number 8 at Canada, and there's par 3, water down the whole left coming up to the green, and I should have changed my glove before the shot. And I have these nice new set of irons I had just got. Tee up the 7-iron, follow through. All of a sudden, club flies right out of my hands. It's somersaulting or whatever, twirling. I'm like watching it, goes right into the middle of the pond. So out of my hands and then into the water. And the worst part, like the pond's not that deep. It's 6 feet at the deepest part, but it went right in the middle. So my 7-iron is rest in peace at the number 8 pond at Canada Golf and Country.
Wow, there should be a special sign put on there if there's a rock and put a little plaque and
like a memoriam, eh? Yeah, like
exactly. And when Wally threw this out too, I thought Eric had stolen your club. Because
he ran out of clubs.
His bag of clubs, first of all, he was missing 1, missing 2, missing 3, 15 balls later. And he had a whole potpourri of clubs. And I thought, well, did he just take old Yorkie's 7-iron and put it into his bag to mix it up? That's what I thought for sure had happened.
The best part of the day was, so when we first got to Rideau, I noticed Eric was a very chatty guy, very, very chatty. And then our other friend, Mike Minot, who I know, good friend, I rearranged the carts on purpose and specifically put Wally's bag with Eric's on the cart. Not that I don't love Eric, but I just
doesn't seem like you do.
Let's get salty. Let's get salty Wally and chatty Eric together for 5 hours of golf.
Maybe that's why after hole 2, Wally decided to make the executive decision to walk and have me end up playing. Now, if anybody doesn't follow Eric on Twitter, you got to follow him for the stuff he does with the videos awesome. And everything else. Man, oh man, just great.
He's
work.
a good sport. Good sport.
Yeah.
He's a good sport.
Would you like to see the video? We can play it.
Sure.
Absolutely.
You know, it could be. You know, we could creep into that survey is young Eric, who we golfed with last week. He might be someone people would like to golf. My God.
Eric, unable to hit a golf ball.
The hockey players would chirp and like had some fun, but that's okay. Don't miss them.
There's one.
Fill it with sand. I don't put divots back.
It's going to be a long day, and he would have probably been pantless or shortless by the end of the round.
Well, this young man's had quite an afternoon.
Good stuff. Thanks, Eric.
Yeah.
We appreciate
Yeah.
that.
Great work.
We all need a good laugh.
Mhm.
So, anyway, by the way, tomorrow, Sens are going to hold a press conference. It's expected a major business announcement, which I believe will be they're going to announce the away jersey sponsor.
Nice.
It is reported to be Callion. We'll wait to see if that's actually true.
Okay.
They're also going to talk about the rookie camp, which is coming up starting on Friday, which is going to be live streamed, by the way. Just go to the Sens website. You'll be able to see it. So we'll hear from, I believe, a couple of rookies tomorrow as well, as we get ready for that. And then tomorrow at 3, we'll be back so that we can chat about the rookie tournament that's going to be happening and maybe get a discussion going on who to look for at that tournament. And it seems like they're going to have some nasty players. So we'll see how that goes. Sounds good, boys?
That sounds perfect.
See you guys. Thanks for everybody.
All right,
care.
Ottawa. Cheers.
Thanks for tuning in to Coming In Hot. If you enjoyed the show, hit that like button and be sure to subscribe to never miss an episode.